Well, hi, everybody. Happy Sunday night. I want to thank Matt Woods for being on vacation on a ship, which allowed me to take up the time that he normally has for Marauders. So I have my own Marauders here tonight. We're going to be talking about all things isolation. I have immediately to my left, right? Yeah, to my left, I have Doug Bratton, and below me, Dave Bratton. The Bratton brothers are here. How you doing, Bratton brothers?
Doing great, Joe.
Doing well.
Listen, thanks for joining me today. So the last time I did anything on isolation was almost a year ago. It was about 11 months ago, I think, in connection with issue number 1 coming out. So I just thought, Matt Woods is here. He's on the ship, but he says he's on the ship, but he still has cell service. Hey, Matt.
Hey, man.
Well, let's say hello to a couple of people then really quickly. There we got Tina's in here. Thank you, Tina. Isolation fangirl here. I think I saw Madam Blaster here. Yep, there she is. Stephanie.
Hey, Tina.
We already said hello
Hey, Matt.
to Matt. Who else we have? I think Turbo Man Todd. Hey,
Turbo
Todd's
Man.
here. How you doing, Todd? Good to see you.
Hey, Todd.
All right. Okay, I think that's it for now, but that's cool. I think we have 4 people here. All right. So I was saying that was the last time I did it. And, I read the book and it's really good. But issue number 4 is going to be coming out fairly soon. There's a lot of activity behind issue number 4, And, so I was looking, I decided I had all my stuff in these folders. I said, let me see how many issues I have. Now, there's only been 3 issues, right? Look at how many I got here. I can't even, let's see, how many have I got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different issues, including this, which I got as a nice bonus from Regie when I bought some. I got a bunch of them that are signed. This is one of my favorites. All right. Which you see there, the trade dress in the back.
Yep.
And this has like shiny stuff on it. And it's signed by all 3, Doug, Regie, and Delia, the artist. Great variant. This is my favorite here.
The Death Dealer homage.
Isn't that great? Oh, that's such a nice one. I have to put the, once I get my comic book room in the new house, I got to put that up somewhere. And I found out later on that this was one of the first 25. That's what that little thing says there. I couldn't read it, but then I read it there, issue number 22, which is really issue number 2, rather. I got another one of these. I got this one, another shiny one, signed by Regie and Doug. All right. This reminds me of my druggy days back in the 60s, so I really like this cover. Another number 2.
Adam.
Right.
Adam Shermer variant.
Right,
Yep.
right. Here's another one. I don't know who the artists are, but you can shout them out if you know.
Well, that's Delia did the cover art and Chase did the interior. Chase Count.
All right. That's a beautiful one. And here's the trade dress of that. And apparently I've got 2 of them for some reason. Right here.
Oh, nice.
And that one I showed beforehand. So I guess you could say I kind of like isolation, right? So Doug, let's ask you a couple of questions about isolation, especially for people who may not have, known about it a little bit. And here, Gary's here. Hey, Gary.
Hey, Gary.
So now what inspired you to start writing the isolation comic books? Give us a little bit of background history on this thing.
The short version is that when I was doing my newspaper comic panel, I just keep a notebook of ideas for projects as a writer, and did not have time to do anything else other than my regular job, right, and the syndicated comic panel. And so I would just write down ideas for projects and things that I was interested in. And isolation, the original idea came from, which, Beth Charland, actually, our letter and one of the con exclusive artists, told me, don't say that because people will think you don't know what you're doing. But I watched the series Lost on television, which was a really fantastic mystery series that, whether or not the original team knew where they wanted to go with it or not, it meandered and went off the rails. It was a really well done show. It had some great ideas behind it, but the writers seemed to know more how to set up mysteries than connect the dots and bring them back. And I got annoyed with that show when it ended, because I felt kind of duped. Like, hey, you put out all of these things that made me interested and I wanted to know, and then you just left all these loose threads because you really didn't know where they were going. And I kind of, after watching that show, got kind of a, this attitude like, well, someday I'm going to write a mystery, but I'm going to take the time and really plot it out and develop it and make sure I know where everything's going. And that was kind of what inspired me to write Isolation.
Well, and that's interesting too, because the one thing that I'm fearful of, Doug, is you mentioned on, maybe it was on Reggie's channel, that in order to really complete this, it's got to be around 33 to 36 issues. And we're only on issue number 4. And so that means to me that you got to start raising some money and make sure you get enough money in here for these type of things. And, with respect to that, I think that, one of the things that, people need to understand is that, you guys are kind of doing this from the standpoint of, just raising money, and here's like on SwolDierPublishing.com, here's the Isolation number 4 Kickstarter. It's a pre-sale. And there are a lot of different things you can do. Right now, there's 2 covers, all right? But there's a lot of different Kickstarter packages you can get here. One or more might be sold out at this point in time, but it's SwolDierPublishing.com, the Isolation Kickstarter. So I think it's important that people kind of understand that, you guys are kind of going, hand to mouth, I guess is the best way of putting it right now.
Yeah.
So, what about this? I mean, has the Kickstarters, the raising the money, has that stuff been working out okay so far?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's helped a great deal. I think what a lot of people don't know about doing an indie comic is it ain't cheap, and there's a lot of costs, and you can't get traditional distribution unless you're putting out a number of titles, which at present, Isolation was the first ongoing series. Regie has announced Marcus will come out sometime in the fall. That'll be a second. But it's a small publisher, and Reggie's not putting out 8 books a month and having distribution. And because of that, it's pricey, and we need to be able to make sure that we're at least profitable to the point that it can continue. Regie does something that a lot of indie publishers do not do. I don't know how much people talk about this or not, but Regie pays all of the artists and creative team like a rate that would be comparable to like a Marvel or a DC. Whereas many, it's back-end royalties only for anybody. So if you don't make money, they don't make money. And Regie doesn't believe in that. He's a business person. He works in the business world. He feels that, people who put in a significant amount of time should be compensated. But that, adds to the costs. And because of that, it's become kind of a, well, let's make sure each issue is profitable so we can do the next.
So I got in the mail one of the Kickstarter things, which was Doug, I think a photocopy or a copy of, there's comic books in here too. I got some bonuses, I guess.
There you go.
But I won't bring those out right now. Isolation manuscript. So I haven't opened it up. It looks like I've got number 8. I didn't get number 1, Doug. I'm very disappointed, but that's okay. So I got number 8 of 20. So you wanted to tell people about this? And again, SwolDierPublishing.com, I think is where you would go to get this. There's still some available.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I will say this. All of the art team provides items free of charge to help support the Kickstarters.
Mhm.
And for this issue, for the last one, I did like a copy, assigned a numbered copy of the script for issue number 1.
Right. I missed
When
that.
I first wrote Isolation, I envisioned it more as a comic series or a streaming show. But having worked in the comics industry for a long time, I knew getting an ongoing series greenlit would be very, very challenging. So I started by writing a novel thinking, well, I'll refine it and I'll, seek out an agent and I'll pitch it to traditional publishing houses. When I finished a draft of it that still needed some revision, I had the opportunity to pitch it as a comic series and pivoted when Regie greenlit it.
So I want to talk to you a little bit more about the characters and things like that, but let's get Dave in here because Dave has been very nice to join us, and I don't want him just to sit by and just listen to his to his brother.
He does that a lot.
His kid brother.
I do.
So now Doug is the writer. And you are one of the artists that's going to be on a cover for Isolation number 4. But you were originally on one of my favorite covers of the Guide to Smart Comic Book Collecting. This was your pencils.
Yes.
And inks, I guess.
Actually, that cover was not inked.
Oh,
it was just pencils. And Adam Shermer, who's the digital painter, kind of like, I think, upped the contrast so the pencils were darker. He did the digital stuff so the pencils looked a little bit more like inks, and then painted it.
So you're a traditional guy, right? Pencils. You don't go into the digital stuff, do you?
I have not played around with the digital stuff. That is not my domain yet. Maybe one day.
Okay, so this is definitely like like wall art for me. All right, but what about
how'd you like it?
Isolation number 4?
Yeah,
I think that's kind of wall art as well. And there it is.
There it is.
So that's going to be and again, we go back to SwolDierPublishing.com. I forget what letter it is, but it's one of the options that you have in terms of getting helping out the financing of number 4. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that one and how that one came about?
Yeah,
and nobody has it yet, right? It hasn't come out yet.
No, it has not come out yet. No. So I'll go way back.
Okay.
When Doug and I were kids, we used to make our own comic books. I mean, we created 5 full issues. I mean, like 20 plus pages of a comic book called Justice Force.
Yeah.
No way a total ripoff of the Justice League.
Right.
So I mean, so we had fun doing that as kids. We also had fights doing that as kids. But now that Doug has created this amazing project, if I can contribute, if I can be a part of it, that just takes me back to that in all the best ways. Doug and I, we grew up together. We're still very close. We live close to each other. We talk every day. So to be a part of it, to get to be a part of it, the fact that Regie allowed me to pitch him this cover. And so the way I did it, this one I did, I knew I wanted to do an homage.
Right.
And I had a couple ideas, and Doug and I always bounce ideas off each other. And I mentioned one, I mentioned another, and I said, well, what do you think about a Dark Knight Returns homage? And Doug was like, oh yeah, that would be cool. So that's what this clearly is. But as I was working on it, it turned into a double homage. And I was really trying to figure out the pose. I have some preliminaries that some of you may or may not have seen. And I thought, well, you know what? I really like Superman's pose from Superman number 1. And I just flipped it. And that's how we kind of came to that cover. Now, I'd been in talks with Adam Shermer because Adam's my partner in this. This is, I'm proud.
He worked on this one with you as well.
Yes, Adam Shermer did the colors for this as well as the Black Adam homage for the guide. And in my head, I'm like, you know what? I've seen a lot of Dark Knight Returns homages, and they always have the same elements: the silhouette, the lightning, and the dark blue sky. And I'm like, maybe we change up the color. Instead of blue,
Mhm.
let's go red. I think that could be really striking. And
Nice.
I think everyone's going to see it and know it's an homage, but it'll also look different in a way that I've never seen before. So for this one, I did the sketch, I did the pencils, and then I inked it. And, I haven't done a lot of inking in my time, but this was a silhouette, an all black silhouette. It kind of had to be done. So, I moved into that. And because of that, I've started inking a couple other, fun projects for myself.
So what do you use for inking? Because I do some drawing myself, and I've tried some inking with different media, but I'm not sure. I mean, I see what the professionals use, which is kind of like a small excuse me, brush and stuff like that, which scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. So what do you use when you ink this thing?
So I just bought a few ink pens from the Kubert School.
Right.
I think I bought 3 different ones. I use the smaller ones to outline it, to make sure I get that firm line around it. And then I'd use a little bit larger one to sort of bring it in a little bit. And then I had a thicker one that I just kind of like, not a brush per se, but it covered a lot more ground on the interiors as a silhouette. That was easier than just using a little tiny one to kind of scratch it in. So I used the smaller microns to create that hard line around the silhouette.
And what size paper do you use when you do one of these?
I used actual standard comic book paper for it. Oh,
Like
no, I
11
did
by
not. I'm
17? Is
sorry.
that what it is?
I did that for a couple other projects. For this one, I didn't need it. I just used a regular pad of paper, excuse me. And I just did it because it didn't need to be on a typical comic book page.
Uh-huh.
Adam just needed the silhouette to place it in there and do it. And Adam and I have been like texting back and forth for about 10 months. Because when it came to the color, when we say swipe in comics, you think about, stealing a pose. Adam is very high up in the advertising world. And I had a cup of coffee with an ad firm back in the day. And the term swipe there means, well, you get an example and you use that as sort of an inspiration. You don't copy it, but you're like, it has this feel. So what I was doing, I was finding pictures of lightning with red and purple skies and sending him those shots for sort of to get a sense of the color for
Nice.
the image.
That's great. It's great that you can work together so well. One other question that I have, in terms of because the inking just intrigues me. I'm sorry, guys, that are watching, if this makes you is boring to you. But now, before you inked your pencils, I mean, did you scan it in and ink the scan?
I did not. I actually inked the pencil.
Wow, you have a lot of guts, my friend.
It's why I haven't liked inking in the past, because I'm afraid if I make a mistake, because this was a silhouette and the fine details, didn't necessarily exist within that picture. I think I felt a little bit more at ease kind of just going for it. But actually, the funny thing is, I didn't mess up, but I did a different version. The very first version I did of this, the character's Grey Wolf's hair is like flowing and all over the place. And Doug, and my opinion, my thought process on that was, okay, he's in a battle. Those braids have come out. His hair's everywhere. He's jumping. The hair's flying. And Doug's like, yeah, but those braids are really, they're really strong, clear visual and really, differentiate the character from just any character with longer hair. And I'm like,
especially in silhouette.
Good. Yeah, exactly. In a silhouette. I'm like, good point, Doug. So what I did is I went back, I bought tracing paper. I traced my original and then redrew the hair in one of the knives and then inked that. So they're actually sort of 2 original pieces of art to create that one image.
Well, I'm sure they're going to go for hundreds of dollars on eBay soon.
Dozens of pennies. So,
well, that sounds great. Thanks, Dave. I mean, I'm always intrigued with this, because I do some drawing and things like that. I don't have a lot of time to do what I'd like to do, but it was always something that I worked on. So I'm always intrigued to hear how people do these type of things.
Yeah.
So that's good. All right. So the other question, let me go back to Doug. Doug, so how do you develop your characters? Because you mentioned, there are a lot of characters in here. We won't talk about the actual story other than you can give a little summary about what it's about, but there are a lot of interesting characters here. And as you go along, you're trying to figure out who some of them are and what their connection is. And we know it's over the space of different time periods as well, which makes it even more kind of intriguing and, wondering, how's this all connected? So how did you come up with the characters for this?
Some of it is it is a function of the periods of history that isolation is set in. Like, isolation is a fictitious place set in a real place. There are no, mountains in Sabine Parish with this hidden valley in it. It's a fictional place, but it is set in Louisiana, and it's set in Louisiana for a reason, multiple reasons that will become evident over the course of those 30 some odd issues. And the different time periods are very specific periods of time for what was happening in the world at that time. So some of it is a function of what was going on in the world and what are those influences that would happen to the people set in that time period. As far as actually creating the kind of the unique voice or different perspectives, personalities of characters, what I tend to do as a writer is think about, okay, what made this person who they are? What were their life experiences? What were they taught by their parents? What were they taught by their culture and their community? And then I think, how are these characters like me and my voice, so that when I'm thinking like, well, what would I do in that situation? Would I do that, or would I not do that? Would I say that? Would I not say that?
Do you internalize to yourself, or if you come up with the character, whether it's historical, whatever it happens to be,
yeah.
Do you then say something like, "Oh, this guy is just like my brother Dave," or I'm putting this personality of someone else that I know kind of somewhat in the particular character?
So I really
do any of that.
I do both. I try and think of, how are they like me and how are they different from me, and why are they different from me, and what is their life experience that has made them different from me? What is their personality that's different from me? Who is that personality remind me of? And I do that because, as a writer, you're telling a story and you're creating interactions and dialogue, and you want to be aware of, when you're writing, like, what is too much of me and what I'm thinking coming out versus what is coming out of that character. So I try and be aware of all of those things before I write. And then there's an old cliche that writing is rewriting, but it's very, very true. I write multiple drafts of everything, including the scripts, and I always take time to go back and reread it and think about it and say, okay, is it true to that person who is 5% like me in this way and 95% of me different?
That's interesting. So see, there is a story that I've fooled around with for years that my father told me a long time ago, because he was a prisoner of war in Germany, but he actually fought for the Italian army. And when Italy surrendered, like, they were told by the Nazis that they were going to go home, but they were instead sent to a prisoner of war camp.
Yep.
And there's some interesting things. He never spoke about it, but there's many things that he told me, at least a certain amount, that I always thought would make a great story. And I've played around with it a little bit. But one of the things is, although I know my father and I know what he told me, it's just a little bit, so I can, and I've sat down and like tried to get different characters, like who's there. I know the story of how he got, it's like this watch and what they did and things like that. So I've tried to come up and say, okay, how many other characters would be in this kind of short story or something like that? And what would they be? And I would actually, I've done a little bit of this, but I've actually sit down and say, okay, you've got, Marcello or something like that. And here's what he did when he wasn't a soldier. Here's what he did when he was a soldier. Here's his personality. Here's how he, how he reacts to where he is and I write that out. I mean, did you do something similar for at least the major characters that are there?
Yeah, absolutely. And coming up with some sort of backstory or knowing where they come from. I think that's especially important with villains, because it's way
My
too.
villains are the Nazis, so it's easy, you know.
Yeah, but at the same time, like if you want to fully develop any character, you have to, and with Nazis, that's probably harder to do, but you have to try and understand what were they taught? Why were they taught that? What are they believing? Because in your villain's mind, they're the hero of the story. You know, they think the governor, the high priest in isolation, who are in the 1869 time period, your villains, like, they think a certain way and they believe their cause is righteous, even if the rest of us, it's very obviously not. But if you just make your villain hoo hoo ha ha ha, I'm evil, that's not how people are. That's not even people who act that way. They have motivations and they have belief systems and core values, and you have to try and get to that before you write the character. Otherwise, they're going to seem shallow.
Some of it, I would think you have to be careful because, you know, it's like a villain could be there's some sort of stereotypical type of approach to them, you know, and you have to kind of stay away from that and realize that they are really people in their own rights who have backgrounds, experiences, maybe families. And you're right, they may very well feel that they are the heroes and they're doing what they believe is right for whatever reason. And so what is their motivation, how it works? That's a very good point.
And Joe, I'll give an example of someone who took an existing character and changed it in a way that I thought worked well. I would have liked to have seen more development, but it was in a 2.5-hour movie. And that was Christopher Nolan's Two-Face in The Dark Knight. The comic book character, gets acid on his face and, goes mad and flips a coin. Christopher Nolan added in the element that he watched the person he loved get blown up in front of him when he was scarred and injured. And that makes that character more believable. An unbelievable character created in the 40s, a lot more believable because of that change, to understand what that motivation is and make that character seem more real.
Okay. Well, Dave, I mean, how much of all this stuff have you actually ghostwritten for your brother, Doug?
Joe, I can only take 97% of the credit.
I figured as much.
No, I will say
but
this.
I'll take 98.
If you'll give me that, sure. No, I will say this. I was very fortunate that I mean, I was hearing about isolation years and years ago when it was just sort of a nascent idea in Doug's head, and he's like, I've got this idea, and he'd bounce some things off me, and then he'd give me pages. He wrote this manuscript and he'd give it to me, and Doug, you can jump in if you want on this. Doug's very talented. He's been doing a lot of creative things for a long time, and I've gotten to sort of help out in that he comes to me as a pseudo editor at times. And I'll read it and I'll look for certain things, and there are things in isolation, he'd give me some pages and I'd be like, I'm not sure I get this, or I'm not sure this, this, I don't know if that makes sense to me as a reader. What do you think? And then Doug can take those, those observations and say, you know what? Oh, I like where it's at, or, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll change something here. So I've gotten to contribute a little bit to this
and that's important.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how much editing or what have you that Reggie might do on this, but I mean, even when I used to do memos and stuff, practicing law, I had some people who had me as their fallback person. I mean, and you're right, Doug. I mean, even a very short memo, I would rewrite it 5 or 6 times before we go where it needed to go. And if I felt it was important enough, I would have somebody else read it again. and say, this is what I'm trying to get across. Does it work? So having somebody to kind of go through the stuff and look at it and say yes, no, or maybe, I think is really, really important. So you're fortunate to have your brother Dave there to do that.
Absolutely. Writers need editors. Almost any writer that I know has readers, that they bounce early drafts off and trust for the feedback. And it's important. And Dave has been that for me for years.
Dave's head is getting bigger and swelling as we can. He's going to be off the screen pretty soon.
When George Lucas made the original Star Wars trilogy, his wife at the time was kind of his editor. Literally, she would edit the film together, and he really didn't have that when he did the prequels. And I feel that most people look at the original trilogy and look at the prequels, and the quality is quite different. And I do think any creative person, needs to trust feedback. It's a balance between deciding, okay, what feedback do I take? What do I leave? But one of the things I've noticed, if I usually have a group of readers that I'll give it to. If I get the same comment from like 3 of them, it's got to change. Like something is sticking out that's not working. Now, if 5 say, "Oh no, I like that," and 1 was like, that didn't land with me, then it's my decision. But when you have multiple people who you trust questioning the same things or giving you similar advice, it's wise to take.
So Doug, you have a family, you have a full-time job. You're on Reggie's show whenever he asks you to be on the show. You're helping me out now, but it is a Sunday evening. So how do you balance all this? Because it would seem to me that to go ahead and take your concept and your scripting and go ahead and put that into a comic book script, and then dealing with the artists and going through this thing, to me, that seems like it would take an awful lot of time. So how do you balance all that out? Do you put deadlines on yourself, or does Reggie do that, or how does that work?
Yeah, it is pretty much about setting deadlines for yourself and sticking to them. And also not just setting a deadline, but creating a schedule that works for you. Like knowing how much time, like after many years, I know how long it takes me to write a scene, and if I know if it takes me about 2 hours to write a good rough draft of one scene, and I've plotted out a chapter, or in this case, an issue of a comic, and there's 6 scenes, I know I need about 12 hours, and I know I need to block off if I've got 6 weeks to do it, block off a chunk of time once a week. If I've got 3 weeks to do it, block off a chunk of time twice a week. I think it really helped me immensely doing a newspaper comic strip or panel, because the deadlines were every month. I had a lot to do. I had to figure out how to balance that with the rest of my life. It also helped me figure out when I worked creatively well. And that was something that I kind of stumbled upon that's helped me a lot. And when I speak to other creative types, I encourage them to do the same thing. Like, be aware. When I would write my comic panels in batches, and between like 8 in the morning and noon, I might write, 8 up to sometimes 16, 17 good usable ideas. Mm-hmm. If I tried to do it from 1 o'clock till midnight, I might come up with 2 or 3, and it was painful. And I realized, how my brain works. I'm more of a morning person. That's when I think more creatively. So I'm way more productive. And if you can become aware of that, of those natural rhythms that we all have, of like, when our energy is high, when it's low, planning your scheduling around those times is tremendously helpful.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm more of an evening person. When I used to, because I used to get home late, and I was on with the Boy Scouts, for example. I used to do all this stuff. People say, "How do you have time to do all this?" Because you work like 60 hours a week or more. I said, "Yeah, I do it like between like 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. So that's when I do this stuff. And but at work, a lot of times I used to try to get in early.
Yep.
And before things really started getting hectic, and you can be really productive. You get a lot done there. So I agree with you. And I think that's a good lesson for anybody, whatever you do.
Yeah.
With respect to this.
I agree. Oh, Joe, one of the things I realized, we keep talking about, the Kickstarter script, and I went off. Am I here? Am I on?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I thought the screen froze. I kind of went off topic and never explained that what you ordered is actually the draft of the first chapter of the manuscript of the novel. And it also includes about 4 pages of like handwritten notes and an outline of a pre-draft to that. So I talked a little bit about writing the novel, but I didn't specifically say that that's what you ordered. It's limited to 20 copies as part of the Kickstarter.
So the most interesting question I might have for you, and I have a couple more after this, is should I open it up or keep it pristine? Because could it be worth like many dollars maybe in the future?
Read it. Open it and read it. That's any writer. Like, yeah, if you get 2 copies of issue number 1 and one's the glossy signed one, don't open that one. Have the reader, but definitely read that.
Okay, I'm just joking with you. All right. Well, okay, a couple more questions. So we talked a little bit about like timing and so forth. So once you get a script done and you give it to Delia or whomever, I mean, what's the process at that point? If you can give us maybe just a couple of minutes so people understand, how you work on that and how you get to like go to a final copy.
So script goes to Regie and then to a editor/proofreader who he's hired for feedback. Once they make any edits to it, then it goes to the artists. I usually with the I end up approving like the preliminary sketches of the pages. So the artist will send me, and actually will send Beth and I both. Beth is the letter to make sure there's enough room, and me to make sure that it's conveying what it needs to convey. And then they ink them. And after they're inked, they go to Beth. 80% of the time, she just puts in the word balloons as is in the script and sends them to me to review and approve. 20% of the time, something's odd or off or doesn't quite fit the way we thought it would. And then we hop on a meeting and kind of talk through it. And sometimes I'll literally edit a script at that final stage.
Okay.
Say, okay, we need to tighten that up a little bit. Here's how we're going to do that. So, and then after that, when it's uploaded, it goes back to Regie, back to the editor proofreader that he works with, and then everything goes off to pre-press.
Got it. So it's a pretty long process. So about how long does it take to get one of these issues out, would you say?
I mean,
let's say from after you're completed with the script.
Some of that depends on the artist that's hired. Delia, who did all of the work on issue number 1 and 2, because she paints everything in grayscale, it would take longer than, Chase, who's a more traditional pencil and inker. But using one individual to do the pencil and inks, you can think of it, maybe the easiest way to look at it is like about a day per page for layout and pencils and a day per page for inks.
Okay. And And David indicated that he got his inking pens at the Kubert School. So is the connection with all these artists and letterers, are they all connected with the Kubert School? Is that where you met them or got them to work on your project?
Yeah. So for other than a couple of the like cover artists, yes.
Okay.
It's very close to our house. Dave and I grew up near the Kubert School. We know the quality of it. We know the owner and who is a Batman artist currently. I don't know if I can say about anything about any other project he's working on. So I'll say Batman.
I have mine here somewhere. I don't know where
Anthony
they
Martin.
are.
Yeah. But
He was
that's
very
how
nice. I met him at the Comic-Con. He was very, very nice man.
yeah, he is a great guy.
Anthony, right?
Anthony Marquez. And
Marcus.
he's a great guy. They run a great school, and we've hired numerous artists from the school who are mostly recent grads.
All right, Dave. I'm glad you're sticking around, Dave. I thought you might have to leave, but that's okay.
Couple minutes.
Okay, whatever. I have one more question. So there's only
Sure.
one more question. So now you've accomplished this. I mean, you're working towards it. Hopefully we get the entire story. If not, you're going to have to do some sort of a prose piece or something to finish it up, but hopefully we get it all done because that'll be terrific. So kind of what, so your goal with Isolation obviously is to finish the story, right? Do you have any goals or dreams that you might have as a comic book writer or author that maybe goes beyond Isolation? And I mean, and I know, I mean, our hope is, I know Isolation #1 is in Key Collector app. I know that. But is there a possibility also, do you think that we might get some laudits or something for Isolation as well? So kind of a two-part question there.
Yeah. I think in terms of just, I want to tell a great story. That's it. I want to finish it, and it will be finished. The certainly the goal and the dream is to finish it as a comic book series. So that's first and foremost. When I first thought of the idea, I thought it would make a wonderful streaming series. It's written to kind of to be like a 3-season series. So that would be if it's probably more of a dream than a goal right now, but as we focus more of our attention and finding ways to accomplish that, maybe that will become more of a goal. I think the possibility of that happening has a lot more to do with the success and the quality of what we put out. So we'll see what happens with that someday. I have.
Hey, before you go on, I want to comment on that real quick. Through the channel, I've gotten to actually meet and contacted through Instagram with some other writers and artists. And I know of one that has been working really hard for years, trying to get out there. And although I can't mention who it is or what the story is or anything like that, I do know that one of his comic book series is, if it hasn't been, it's very close to being picked up, for a series. So, and I think from what I've read so far in Isolation, I think it's a natural. You just got to keep plugging along and get to the right people and the right contacts to be able to see this, and be able to pick it up, because I think that's it's just perfect for something, like a HBO Max series or something, or Netflix series or something like that. I just wanted to say that because I really truly believe that, and I think you guys should keep working towards that, because I think it can happen.
Thank you, Joe. And I agree. These things do happen. They are not easy. And you have to find the right gatekeepers and find champions who know the industry and help you get there. But I absolutely think that it can get there, whether it gets there in 3 years or 23 years is different. But I I appreciate those words, and I do think it would make a fantastic streaming series.
Okay, so what else are you looking at? Are you looking at doing something else with respect to comic books, or is this basically it for you at this point in time?
Going back to your question about meeting deadlines, like I firmly believe in focusing your energy on the project that you need to get done. So right now I am solely focused on making sure Isolation gets done and I meet my deadlines. With that said, I have a lot of other ideas in those books.
I thought you would.
Some of them I really, really like and am itching to do at some point when I have the time to do it. That's the other thing. I work a job that is not an easy one, and that takes a lot of time. So if someday, whether it's 9 years down the road and I'm retired, I'll get back a lot of time.
I'll tell you something. When you get retired, you don't always have a lot of time.
Well, what I mean by that is if I get to a point, whether it's through isolation or through retirement, where I get some of that time back, I do like to keep busy and I like to do creative projects. So that,
I know,
that's what I mean. But there are other projects out there, and the Isolation is not the first comic script I've written. I've written essentially a full graphic novel and a second part to it, and have a third part kind of mapped out that I wrote before Isolation. But it's a Batman specific one that there is one publisher on the planet that I can pitch it to, and they're not easy to necessarily to pitch to, and until they see your work. And if at some point that opportunity or door opens, I have already something else ready to go. So
a Batman noir type, but it fits right into the Isolation scenario. So I could see it.
It's a mystery
working.
And I want to jump in on this one as a longtime comic book reader and fan, and a big Batman fan. I've read hundreds of Batman comics, hundreds. I would say Doug's Batman story is easily top 5.
Wow.
Easily.
Amazing.
That good.
That's great.
See what happens.
Yeah. Who knows?
Okay. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I got to make believe that I'm a writer and an artist, during this conversation with you guys, but I mean, Isolation is just a fantastic, pickup. And I'll just say again, if you're watching this now, or if you're watching it on replay, if you can go and to SwolDierPublishing.com, take a look at what's available. And I'm not sure if it's in the comments, rather in the description right now, but I'll put the link in there. Go in there, take a look at what's there. Some of the artwork is fantastic. The stories themselves are really good. And, I just took a quick look on eBay, and I think, some of the earlier issues are going for in excess of $10, $12. So that's not so bad, with respect to even potentially an investment. And as probably will happen, if this becomes a Netflix series, just think about, I've got things signed by these people. I'm going to be, I can retire from my retirement on this stuff. Anyway.
I hope you can, Joe.
Doug, thanks a lot. Hopefully I'll see you this summer, you and Dave. Yeah. Dave, thank you again. And just before we close out, I just want to say that Dave and I have recorded a show that will be on Wednesday evening, a premiere Wednesday evening at 9, about the $1 billion movies. So I think it's pretty interesting. We had a really good conversation about that. So you should tune in Wednesday night at 9 Eastern Daylight Time for $1 billion movies. All right, guys. So again, I want to thank you both for showing up. And thanks for everybody that sat through, everybody in the chat. I appreciate you guys being there and supporting the channel. And hopefully you learned a little bit about isolation, its history, and how it worked out. And we'll see you the next time around. So take care, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay.